Hey everybody, welcome to the Product Rocket Launch webinar. Most of you know me, but in case you don't, I'm John Cummings from barefootandrich.com and the author and creator of Teaching Millions. And if you're on this webinar today, you're probably one of thousands of people that I've communicated with or interacted with in some way over the past few months who are looking to turn their knowledge or their expertise into a passive income stream. And as many of you know, I call this Teaching Millions, and I built an extensive course around how to make millions by teaching millions of people what you know. But I think most of us on the webinar today already have that mindset. You know, we're experts at something. We share the common vision of giving up a traditional model of earning a salary or being paid by the hour, helping one person or one company at a time. Instead, we like to earn money by teaching potentially millions of people. And when I tell people that, a lot of the times that the reaction they get is, well, how in the world can you do that? How do you scale so much where you're actually teaching millions of people? And many of you know the answer already. It's quite simply that you need to package what you already know, what you're already an expert at, into a training course, a seminar, or some other information product and make it available to the world over the internet so you can reach the masses. And there's many ways to package and sell what you know. But whatever vehicle yours is, whatever you're going to choose, I'm going to call it a product during this webinar and training so that we can all stay on the same page. You know, you can have DVDs, you can teach in classrooms, you can do public speaking, but I want you to think of all of those things for the sake of today's webinar and training as product. So just really briefly, I'd like to just open the microphones. Everybody currently is muted, and I'm going to take a second if I can figure out where the audio is for everybody and try to mute or unmute. And as I unmute, please just say hello. And hold on one second while I unmute everybody. Got some echoes going on. So on the count of three, if everybody would just say hello, we'll get an idea. Maybe with a little bit more spirit this time.
Hey.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
All right. Hello. So I'm going to just mute that for now so we can get into the training. But I'm hoping that everybody can hear me. Leave a question if you want in the chat or the private messaging box, and I'll be happy to answer your questions as we go along if I can do that while I'm going through the script. So for any professionals listening today, like lawyers, doctors, and accountants, I want to just address you for 1 second. Please don't tune out simply because my introduction included information and marketing in the same sentence. I get it. I'm a lawyer. I know how the internet marketing label is often perceived, but if it makes you feel any better about being among us, keep in mind that nearly all of the continuing education that you've paid for follows this model. And you may just never have realized that you too could use this model and make money this way by reaching the masses, packaging what you know, and making a lot more money in a lot less time. And to address that and to just give you an idea that a two-sided attack at some of the objections people have to this business model. Number one, some of us see this is only attainable by the Tony Robbins and the Malcolm Gladwells of the world. And I want to disabuse you of that notion. Everybody on this call is more than capable of becoming very wealthy using this model, regardless of whether or not they become Malcolm Gladwell or Tony Robbins. And I also want to show you that there are, a lot of respectable people in that middle area that are not, just shilling information products, as they're always called, or something like that. And one of them is a good friend of mine named Jackson Mummy, his real name, by the way. And he basically is an ex-attorney who I ran into because I was kind of putting my foot back into the water of legal practice in Florida. So if you know my story, I retired from the practice of law over 10 or 12 years ago. And I had a whole bunch of people saying to me, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And I was like, no, I can't because I don't practice law anymore. And they're like, well, couldn't you just do this or do that? I'm like, no, I can't practice in Florida. I'm not licensed in Florida. So lo and behold, I said, you know what? What's the big deal? I'll just get my license. And I went to look into the process, and it was like hair-raisingly impossible to become a lawyer in Florida if you're coming from out of state. Florida is what they call a Yankee go-home admission state. And I got a kick out of that at first until I realized it was going to be a really hard slog to get myself admitted. So I start looking around on the internet, and I found Jackson Mummy. And I'm so thankful that I found him because he had a course that not only took you through the review that you would normally take for a college course or a test like an SAT or something like that, or a bar exam. He knew everything about these people that sit in Tallahassee and try to keep you out. It was like a cheat or a tips and tricks book about the whole process. But he included like an amazingly long number of hours of training, 30, 40 hours of videos. And I watched all of them. But in 60 days, he compressed my entire uh, learning process into this little package that I was able to deal with. And I passed the bar swimmingly. And although I paid him a couple $1,000s, I probably would have paid him 10 times that if I knew how much this guy was going to shortcut my learning curve. So when you think about what the value of your product is, please don't underprice your product because you think it's not valuable enough. Price it where you deserve to be paid and then deliver the value that meets that. And that's a Tony Robbins line that you should raise your standards, and sometimes you have to raise your prices to do that. And then as you think of your price at the top of a little bucket, and the bucket is coming up with you as you raise that price, you're going to need to fill that bucket with the value that corresponds to the size of the bucket you've just created because of the price tag. Anyway, today's webinar is not for me to convince you that the Teaching Millions concept is a good way to make money. I think you're all on this webinar today because you're on board with that, but you're stuck trying to get to first base. Or maybe you've been lucky enough to get to first base and you've got your name out there and you've got a website, but you just can't seem to get all the way home. And this is where I want to teach you today, because I've done this now several times, how you can launch any product that you're working on in 30 days or less. But more importantly, I want to teach you about why. And this is the part that I think is the meat and potatoes, why you have to launch a product in 30 days or less, or you're never getting out of those starting blocks. Trust me. So in that process of teaching you the why, I want to show you why launching a product is actually how you build a list, why launching a product is actually how you forge the JV relationships and the affiliate relationships that you're coveting and that you've heard about, but you're like kind of still in like Scooby-Doo land about, and you're like, I'm not really sure how to do that. And then thirdly, which is a two-part third, how launching your product is really the only way that you're going to guarantee real feedback about whether anybody even cares about what you think you're good at or you're selling, and the only way to actually get evidence of what people will pay you for that expertise that you have, if anything, because you may find out that nobody cares. So we need to figure that out quickly and not in 2 years. Now, this information I'm going to share with you today, I actually gathered this over the past 60 days through phone interviews and coaching sessions with like 50, about 50 people. And I did that with people in about a dozen different industries. And judging by the number of people on this call today, which I'm astounded by and humbled by, many of you actually spoke to me on the phone about these issues. And the cool thing is that, and I love stuff that has synergy like this, the intelligence that I gathered was actually made possible because I personally engaged in the strategy and the techniques that I'm going to tell you about in this product rocket launch training. So there's this perfect fit between what I'm teaching you and the proof of concept that it brings to the table, which will all come out as I go through the rest of this training. So the big picture outline, sorry for the long introduction, of today's webinar is two parts. Part one is the concept of why you must launch in the next 30 days, which is going to be the hard part. And then part two is the how. How do you launch a product in 30 days? And that actually is not the harder part. For the record, I think most of you could launch your product, your service, whatever is your marketing, in probably 10 days or less. But I didn't want to scare anybody because I know this is a huge paradigm shift. So I didn't call it 10 days to launch when I announced the webinar. I called it 30. And I think that people came in great numbers today because they can stomach that number and they're willing to say, all right, well, that sounds interesting. Let me figure out how you do that. Now, I know a lot of you don't think that a 30-day launch is even remotely possible because of the way you've been looking at this. Your product is special. You serve a more exclusive market. Your customers are different. And you've all seen that contact lens commercial. I always reference this where they say, oh, I can't order on the internet. I have special eyes. So if any of you have special eyes, trust me, I think you're special. I've talked to a lot of you, but your product is not so special that you can't follow this launch sequence strategy. So your customers aren't different. They might be more expensive. They might be more intelligent, but they're not going to respond differently to this strategy. You're just going to do it in a different place. Now, the other thing I want to bring up in that same vein is I've talked to about a dozen people who have a launch actually scheduled for, I'm going to put this in quotes, early next year or sometime next year. Listen, if you're planning to launch your product next year, I've got bad news. I have a feeling you're going to be very disappointed when early next year or sometime next year comes, because chances are you're not going to launch your product, because the launch itself is what's going to build your momentum, and you're going to launch over and over again to do that. And we're going to talk about that. So the next thing I want to do before I really dive into this is honor the reason why I'm so on fire about this issue. Many of you who have met me or worked with me know that my parents both died in their early 50s. And my dad worked every day from like 7 to 7, commuting on a bus to New York City, traveling around the world to buy new products for JCPenney and other retailers. He had a really important job. At least when I was a kid, it seemed like an enormous job. And his motivation to work so hard was, normal, to give his kids a better life, to send us to college, not have us have to work so hard like he was doing. And I got to say, I love him for that. But my brother and my sister and I rarely saw him, and this is why I get very emotional about this. Some of my best and clearest memories actually come from postcards that he sent me while he was traveling, to Japan, Germany, Canada, all over the world. And then after all the trouble he had gone through for us, and I feel this, very poignantly now as an adult with kids, and probably because of the stress of all that, he had a heart attack and died before I even got finished with law school, got married, had any kids. And to this day, I get really choked up thinking about that. And I vowed that I would be different. And now here's the punchline at the end of a very sad story. I went to law school and became a lawyer after all of that. So until my kids were about 3 years old, I got home at 7 o'clock and worked weekends. Go figure. This is like, like a replay of that song, The Cat's in the Cradle. And I had become my father, at least in that respect. And people say that I look like him and that I act like him. And, that's something I'm proud of. But when I realized that I had to change to not turn out, the way that he did in terms of his time and the way he used his life, I knew I had to do something differently. So within a year of that epiphany, sort of, I launched my first internet business while I was an attorney. And within 2 years, I was out of the practice of law. And I've never looked back from, getting out of the full-time practice. And I bring this up so that you realize that you may not have until next year. Most of us are not the 20-something vagabonds. You've read about all these people that follow the Tim Ferriss 4-hour workweek lifestyle with nothing on their backs but their clothes and their backpack to worry about. And all of you on this call, I guarantee, have kids, maybe even grandkids, and jobs and houses, cars. I could go on and on. But some of you might still be paying off your student loans and have kids coming up that have to be paid. College has to still be paid for. So the truth is, you don't really know when you're going to run out of runway. And if you're sitting on something that's going to inspire other people, make it possible for you to be home with your kids, like I've been for the last 15 years or 12 years or whatever it is, and enjoy your life while serving a lot of people. And here's the fun part, and it's the whole thing behind Barefoot and Rich, actually having money and the time to enjoy it. So my parents being gone, and this picture always reminds me, spurs me every day to live a different life, to do things today that scare the heck out of me, because I've seen how short life can be, and I'm not waiting another day to serve others with, at least with my message, and help other people get closer to their purpose. So as many of you know, I'm a teacher, I'm a facilitator, and I want to be a catalyst. And you're listening to me today because you are too, okay? So let's do this. Let's unpack the first part of this, and it's the why. Why should you launch in 30 days, besides the fact that you could, run out of runway tomorrow? Well, this is the most important part of my talk today, because it's going to convince you that you can stop building your masterpiece for a few days and actually put into action some steps that are going to lead to your launch before you finish the masterpiece that you've been kind of tinkering away at in your secret laboratory, maybe sometimes to the consternation of your spouse or your kids. Like, when are you going to finish this? What are you doing? I know the feeling. And to do this, what I want to do, and I'm not going to have a lot of screen changes right now, I'm going to just go through some some analogies for you and some metaphors, and then I'm going to go into the practical stuff, which is going to involve some changing slides on your screen. So bear with me, have a sip of your coffee, and let me talk about the way I want you to look at this. I want you to think of your product like a baby, and you're pregnant with it. Men, don't get freaked out or weirded out. Just pretend for a minute that you're pregnant too and go along with my analogy. I know that men and women are laughing all over the world right now while they're listening to this, but just suspend your belief for like 1 minute and pretend that we can all get pregnant. Congratulations, you're pregnant. Or maybe not congratulations, you're pregnant. If that were true, this would mean that in 9 months, or 40 weeks to be exact, usually, you would, God willing, give birth to a human child with 2 arms, 2 legs, 10 fingers and toes, among other parts, of course. And, barring some unforeseen complication, by the grace of God, you would have no doubt about what was going to be delivered on some fine day in the future, 40 weeks. And you already knew 9 months in advance exactly what that product was, what the product was that you were going to be blessed with, what it was going to look like, what the sex was in most cases. Let me ask you something. How many of you have ever sent out an announcement about a pregnancy or sent out a baby shower invitation on the day the baby was born, like waiting until the baby was born? You didn't. Nobody did, because usually after about a month or 2 of the pregnancy, depending on whether you've had difficulties with pregnancy, you feel confident enough about the fact, that on a pretty specific date, you're going to have that baby, and you know what it's going to look like, and you know its gender, and you know everything about it. So you send out announcements to your family, and you send out announcements to your friends, and usually, that was done in print and all kinds of fancy stuff. Nowadays, it's probably done more on Facebook than anything else. But at some point, you hold a baby shower, and it's also usually before the birth. Remember, nobody has even seen this so-called baby yet, right? Nobody's saying, though, wait a minute, I'm not going to get on board with this whole baby thing and start buying gifts and going to the bank to get savings bonds and cigars until I see this alleged baby you're speaking of. Well, most of you are treating your product like it's a baby you can't be sure of, or that you can't tell the world about until it's actually born. And I wonder, when I've had these conversations, why do you feel that way? Do you have some reason to believe that the baby that you have is not going to be beautiful or perfect or have all the things a baby is supposed to have? Oddly enough, you would never think that about a baby, right? Because, well, babies are perfect, no matter how imperfect they can be. So my point is, it's time for you to send out some announcements about your pregnancy, about letting people know that you're having this product baby, for lack of a better way to describe it. Except you don't have to carry it for 9 months. This is the great thing about the product baby. You don't have to carry it that long. But most of you have been carrying this baby for a long time, maybe longer than 9 months. Maybe you've been carrying this baby for 2 years, whether it's your book, your course, your idea for something. Don't you think it's time to deliver that baby? All right, one more thing about the baby, and then I'll move off this analogy because I don't want it to get too weird if it's not too late. But this part's practical. If you did carry a baby for 2 years and you still hadn't given birth, think about this for a second. Don't you think people would start to tune you out and say, like, hey, Sally, are you still pregnant? Are you sure you're still pregnant? Are you sure this baby is ever coming? You've been pregnant for like a really long time. Well, it's sort of like the boy who cried wolf at a certain point. And that's how you've treated your audience. If you've even built an audience yet, that's how they're perceiving your book, your course, or whatever product that you've been saying you have an idea about creating all this time. And in a lot of cases, you've probably been blogging a lot or Facebooking, maybe you tweet or you're LinkedIning about all this cool stuff about whatever your topic is, being a better parent, how to become a better marketer, a better CEO, how to pick the right stocks. Whatever it is that you teach, you're probably out there throwing stuff out to people in small pieces to kind of keep them engaged in the thought process that you happen to know something about this topic. And these are all the pieces of what you know and will eventually be in your product, right? So if you ever create the product, the stuff that you're talking about every day that you say you know about is going to end up being your product. Well, I call this breadcrumbing. So like Hansel and Gretel, you're out there leaving all these little pieces of information for your, intended audience, but unfortunately they don't lead anywhere. You've got a trail of breadcrumbs that really doesn't lead anywhere except to maybe more breadcrumbs. And I honor all of you that write things and spread really inspirational messages every day. But if there's nothing at the end of it for you to hang on to, people might be tuning out these occasional bite-sized pieces of information because they're lost in the already existing and rapidly growing fire hose of information that they hear every day from other people like you. And it's probably becoming a little bit white noise, right? You've had this same, I'm sure, the same sensation when you check your Facebook or your LinkedIn feed or your email box, and it's like a disaster. I mean, how can you keep up with all these, like, feel better today, here's some tips on how you can reduce stress and manage your time. So if you're fueling the fire, I should say the fire hose, and offering nothing in the form of tangible help to solve the problem that you're talking about, then you're really just part of the problem. And I say that with love, but I mean this. I know it's not your intention, and it's not the reason you're breadcrumbing. You're not putting out all these little tidbits of wisdom just to hear yourself speak or to annoy anyone. But if you're fueling the fire hose and offering nothing at the end, people will just move on and tune out. So I have a challenge for you today, and this is where my talk sort of shifts direction a little bit. What if tomorrow, instead of just breadcrumbing without anything at the end of the rainbow or the trail, you declared that you were the creator of the 60-day wealth building system, or 101 secrets to a better marriage boot camp, 10 lessons I learned from top CEOs about how to turn around a troubled company. Pick something that you already know you're an expert at. You already know what your course would look like or consist of. You've got the experience, you've got the scars, you have the notes, maybe even a book already written. A lot of you that I talk to actually have books done and published. Now, when you go out there and declare that and say, I've got this product, people will pay attention to you. People are going to opt in to see what this 60-day wealth building system is all about and say, wow, did you see Mary's new product? Check this out. So if you position your initial introductions, your webinars, your blog posts, stuff that you're probably doing a lot of already, but point them to a valuable product in the right way, people will also start to share what you're saying on their lists, on their Facebook pages, on their groups, and their Twitter accounts. And this has been happening to me repeatedly now for the last 90 days. And for the same reasons that you having an actual product at the end of your rainbow or your breadcrumb trail will cause your friends and list to get activated and to opt in and get into sharing mode. The people that your list shares this with are also going to become activated rather than passive. And they'll say to their friends and lists, hey, have you seen Mary's new product? Now, over 1,000 people heard about today's webinar because of what I'm describing to you. And over the past 60 days, I've methodically released, product offerings and done things that put me out there and built up the pieces of those product offerings and then breadcrumbed these pieces through Google, with Google Hangouts, Google Plus, webinars, free videos, and all the other social media vehicles that were out there for me. And all those roads, all those breadcrumbs led here. And I don't have a final count on how many people are registered on the webinar today. People, keep coming on as I'm speaking, but I'm blown away about the success of this because I'm using the strategy that I'm putting in front of you right now. And I put that in front of you. Your friends are going to, take this and see that you're actually walking the walk and talking the talk and share you with others because they're going to say, wow, look at what Mary is doing. All right, so I've beaten that horse to death. But you're saying to yourself, okay, John, I don't have a product yet, and I'm sure you're all on here waiting for me to get to this punchline on how you're going to do this without actually finishing your product. You're not hearing me, John. I don't have this done. That's where I'm stuck. Well, you're feeling like you need to finish it first, but you don't. You really don't. I mean, if you can finish your product completely if you want to. I mean, if you don't feel comfortable actually telling anybody that you've got something for sale until the last coat of paint is on it and it's actually got, the carton ready and everything else, that's fine. But I want you to just remember that Time is short, life is short, and more importantly, it's really never going to happen if you wait until the product is done to announce it, because you're never going to get any traction if you don't announce it. So if you've got most of it done already or some of it done already and you want to do more, that's fine. But I've got a lot of products, in the done or near done state. But what I really want to do is recalibrate the way you think about what the word product or done actually means in this context. So first of all, I want to just do a quick exercise. Even though this is kind of silly, we're not in a room together, but I want you to raise your hand if you've ever taken a college course or paid a tuition to attend a course at any school. I know it's silly, right? Because we're on a webinar. You're probably sitting alone with your hand up, or maybe you're sitting in a conference room and everybody outside of the conference room is wondering what you're doing with your hand up, sitting by yourself at your computer. But the fact of the matter is, you're raising your hand right now because you have paid tuition to attend a college course or some other school. We've all paid to attend a college course or some kind of teaching. Now, you can put your hand down if you saw all of the training that your teacher was promising to teach you about, or that the college, broadcast to you in the literature that got you to enroll in that course. You can put your hand down if you saw all of that training prior to starting your classes. Your hands are up, right? I mean, mine is. That's how it works. Now, you can also lower your hand if you were concerned at the time that you paid for that course that your teacher, your school, didn't have the resources, the tools, and the knowledge to actually teach you that course. In other words, deliver on the product that you paid thousands of dollars for months in advance. And everybody in the room or around the world right now, except maybe one person who I've confused for some reason, still has their hand up. You can put your hand down now because you're going to lose blood in your fingertips. But my point is that you're already prepared to deliver your product. You've just been looking at this the wrong way. You already know the entire course in your head. You've been teaching, speaking, and writing about this topic that you're the guru or the go-to person on for probably a decade or maybe 20 or 30 years. You're an expert at this, or else you wouldn't be listening to me today. You wouldn't even know what I was talking about. Now, if you don't know what you're an expert at, or if you don't know what your what is, as Steve Olsher likes to say, I'd like to send you a free copy of Steve Olsher's book about that. Just send me an email to info@barefootandrich, and I will send you a link to get that book. You might want to read it anyway. It's a great book. But if that's you and you have no idea what you're good at, please don't launch a product now. I'm talking to the 99.9% of you who already know they're good at something. You already know what your course would look like. And maybe you've already got an ebook or a book of forms or audio tracks or something that you've already created in your mind on paper, and even gotten some of it out onto digital media of some kind. You're ready to announce this product right now. So unless you have some overwhelming reason why you have to deliver 10 packaged DVDs the minute that somebody clicks on your purchase button, or you must absolutely grant access immediately to all 5 hours of your online training the minute somebody clicks on the purchase button, which I don't recommend, by the way, for reasons we're going to talk about, then you are ready to announce your product right now. And this is the first stage of the product rocket launch sequence. You can launch this right now in its current state. And the way that this works is somewhere in between the date of that announcement, which is going to fuel the momentum, the list building, attention among other joint venture partners, somewhere between that announcement date and your delivery date. I keep thinking of the pregnancy again, but between the announcement date and the delivery date, you're going to finalize the course materials and prepare the outlines and the additional bonus materials for delivery as people are ordering it, just like a busy college professor would do. You get your course plan ready, and you're going to schedule people to go through your training over a sequence of time so that you can actually, in some ways, tailor parts of the end of that training to meet the needs of the people that are in your course. And that's really a valuable way to deliver the lesson plan, where you actually you're addressing the needs of the people that are following your training. So, just take a wild guess. How many college professors prepare their courses at colleges where the college has not enrolled any students for the course yet? I'm going to wager a guess that if there's nobody enrolled in the course, the professor isn't going to prepare the course. So I don't want you to do that. All right, so I hope I've got you over the mental hurdle about why. And now what I'd like to do is talk about the how you can do this. So I want to get practical with you, and I appreciate your patience. I think that the setup was probably just as important as the methodology, because we could talk about methodology for 10 hours, and I can only cover so much in this webinar, but I wanted to really get you over that mental hurdle first. So there's three main phases to the rocket launch strategy, and I'm actually outlining these in the way that really fits with the way that I've executed on these over and over again. And when I look back on some of the other businesses I had on the internet that weren't quite this packaged product model, I found that it was the same exact three phases. And the first phase is the discovery phase. And I have to say, this is the phase that I think I spent the most time on with people over the phone. People that are really smart, many people that are smarter than me, especially on the topic that they're an expert in. And the biggest hang up seems to be that they know too much. I've got all this knowledge. I can cover, I could teach 100 things. I know everything about running a company. I know everything about time management. Like I could teach for hours and hours about this. Well, the discovery phase of the product launch is, what is the product? And more specifically, not just, hey, I'm really good at time management, but what would the name of your product be? If you could imagine yourself at your perfect gig, standing in front of a room of 500 people, and you were going to teach them, the secrets to a longer life, or the, top 5 things that you can do to become a better husband or wife today. What is it that you would most like to actually package and put out there if you were going to teach it over 3 days or 5 hours or 6 sessions? What is the name of that? And I want you to do homework on this and make this, like, I'm going to provide this PDF to anybody who was on the webinar, and I'd like you to take some notes there. And that's the most important thing. What is the product name that you could launch if I forced you with the gun to your head to produce it in the next few weeks? Give a name to it. Mine is the product rocket launcher was the name of this seminar today, because that's what I wanted to teach you about. Now, the second part of this is actually 2 parts, which I'm going to show you in a diagram in a second, but it's, who are you best served to serve with this product? And it's actually a trick question. And we will, if you want more help on this, spend a couple hours actually digging into this for your particular knowledge base. The question of who you are best served to serve with your product has just as much to do with how it will serve you as how it will serve them. So you have these 3 colliding pieces of your discovery phase, and if you fill these 3 circles in, and you're honest with yourself, and you believe in yourself, I think that at the end of this hour or so that we're on the phone today, you will probably discover that you've got a product name and that you're ready to move forward, because you're going to see the reasons why you should do it the way I'm describing it. So the first part is, what do you know? I'm not going to make it all about this. We talked about how this is not the part that I think I need to help you with. You probably already know that you're a great dog whisperer, or you're the expert at coaching CEOs, whatever it is. You already know that. The other 2 parts, though, that I think are really most important in shaping what you're going to do with what you know are, number 1, who would you like to serve with that knowledge? What's the group of people? Maybe it's women, maybe it's men, maybe it's CEOs. And most importantly, and these circles probably could be different sizes if I was being honest with the visual here, who can pay you a fair price for what you know, for that product that we named in the previous slide? Now, this is a really simple diagram, but I'm telling you, you could sit with your significant other and your business partner for a couple hours, a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, who drinks a cup of wine, and really dig into this in a way that would help you to just like really hit it out of the park in 2 hours on what you should be selling. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example of this because the who can pay a fair price for it is the rub. This is where people are stuck, and I'm going to tell you why. Some of the people that I've spoken to have an idea that they want to start small. So they've got a very low cost ebook, or they've got maybe an iPhone app or something that delivers content in really small pieces, and they're going to charge for that. And in fact, somebody actually sent me an invitation to buy a product that sounded like a really big, helpful, interesting product, but it was priced at like $10. And my first reaction was, well, it's probably not worth more than $10 if that's what the price is. So what I want you to do first is think about the price point that you're worth. And let's move towards that. And I assure you that unless the only thing you can teach is, how people can sweep, or, how people can, fold a towel more neatly, you're worth a lot more than you think. It's just that you've picked, or you've started to pick or envision the wrong audience for your knowledge. So here's an example, and if you're on this call today, I'm not going to name you by name, but I think if you're on the call, we've had a discussion about this, and this is your example. I hope you don't mind me using it anonymously, but this is just one example, and I think you'll see where it fits with your own paradigm or your own story. So I spoke to an attorney who is a brilliant trial attorney, and although I was never a brilliant trial attorney, I was a trial attorney for some time, and I know at least how to spot a really good trial attorney. So I had this conversation with this person, and she was passionate about getting out of doing trial work because she'd done it for, I think, 25 years in the public defender's office, which, as many of you probably know, even if it's just from television, is not a high income bracket job. And she said, I have this vision to teach other people how to become really good trial attorneys because we're outgunned. There's these huge law firms, and they really they can steamroll us because we don't have the resources to teach people how to become really good trial attorneys. So it takes a lot of experience and training to finally get there. And so I said, all right, well, so your passion then is helping public defenders become really great trial attorneys. And she said, absolutely. And I said, you've got obviously the knowledge base for it. And if I held a gun to your head, besides you having to defend me in court, then, which is weird, you would be able to come up with an actual curriculum for how you would teach people to become brilliant trial attorneys. And she was like, absolutely, I have it outlined. And she showed me stuff on her screen. We were doing a Skype session, and there's just so many parts that she's already got laid out, and she's got obviously 25 years of knowledge in her head that if she could just fill a room with people, she could probably teach it in 2 days and charge each of them a couple $1,000s. And I said, well, that's your course. Your course is a course to teach trial attorneys. I said, but here's the problem I find with your model and with your oxygen flow. If you come up with a course that teaches public defenders how to become amazing trial attorneys, what do you think they would pay for it? Well, public defenders, they only make like $20,000, $30,000 a year to start, and then if they're lucky, they might eke their way up into the 40s or 50s. And I might be getting the numbers wrong, but it was low salaries. And I said, well, so what would they pay? She says, maybe a couple $100, maybe $300-$400. I said, well, what do you think your training is worth? Do you think that what you're offering is only worth 3 or 4? She said, no. I think that the value of what I'm giving is enormous. Tens of thousands of dollars. I think that I should be charging $3,000-$4,000. And I said, well, you know what? I think you should be charging $7,000 or $8,000. I mean, I know the market. I said, but your problem is that you have a sub-market that can't afford you. And while you are already in a very selfless business model, being a public defender, and you're really passionate about helping people, that's great. But you don't need to devote your entire life to helping people in a way that doesn't give you any fuel back that you can sustain it. And I said, I guarantee if you spend the next 6 months building this product, and then you sell it to like 40 people for $300 and make, what is that, $12,000? You're going to be burnt, and you're not going to continue, and you're not going to help all the people that you could help. But picture this. What if you change your mentality from I want to serve public defenders to I want to serve trial attorneys. So if you look at your screen, you'll see that I just changed public defenders to trial attorneys, and I changed the who can pay a fair price to it for it to say not public defenders. So this person who knows that she's an amazing trial attorney is not going to be able to sell her product to public defenders, at least not at first. She's going to sell the Becoming an Amazing Trial Attorney in 90 Days course, which maybe that's too cheesy for a calling of that nature, but for $5,000 or maybe $8,000 to people who work in law firms that can pay for that course. And one of the things we talked about is, if you sell at that price, number one, you look like the person that you are. You're holding yourself out as having the value that you deserve for the experience you have. And more so than that, you're probably going to end up being able to go into big law firms and hold on, I have a question here from somebody. Yeah, somebody wanted me to use the play feature of PowerPoint. I'm going to do that. That's a good idea. I hope you can see that. The other thing that turns into, and this was a synergy that I had with many of my calls, is that if you find one or two attorneys at a law firm that would pay, or that the firm would pay, to render them great trial attorneys, chances are that same firm would have you come in and do a course in their mock courtroom or in a nearby mock courtroom, and maybe charge or pay you $20,000 or $30,000 for the day to train all of their attorneys. And so now you just elevated yourself by your price point because you've identified the market that can pay. And I said, and if you do that, in a couple of years, you'll be making, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, from becoming the expert at amazing trial attorney courses. And what's going to happen then is you can open a new branch of your business and start to deliver that service to the public defenders. And now you've helped thousands of people instead of a handful, and you're in a sustainable business model. So I'd like to evaluate that with any one of you that needs more help. There's a series of questions that you have to go through. That diagram is a good place to start. And then you identify by that price point an elevated audience for what you have, and you identify, in addition to the elevated audience, what the name of that product should be given the audience you're speaking to. And those three things come into synergy at a point where you have this dollar sign in the overlap of those three phases of the three parts of the first phase. So the second phase of this strategy that I call the rocket launch strategy is hard for me to outline in this very short webinar in a way that's serial and laid out extremely clearly. But I'm going to do my best to lay it out for you verbally and give you some visuals to it. Once you've identified that product name and your product audience, and you know what you want to do with it, who you want to serve, the next phase is going to be to actually launch it. And this is where I'm turning your concept on its head. You haven't created the product completely yet, but you're going to launch it first, okay? And to do that, we're going to do some of the stuff that I talked about in my earlier outline. We're going to do some breadcrumbing. And I talked about that in terms of it being somewhat of a negative to just be breadcrumbing like you're just throwing bread everywhere. But if you think of it strategically, it's a really great strategy. The only thing that was missing prior to you hearing me today and changing the way you look at this, is a product. And when I say product, now you know that I mean a product name, a product idea, not necessarily a fully wrapped Tonka truck sitting on a pallet waiting for shipment. So I wanted to get you off that notion. Now that you've got a product, you can breadcrumb effectively as a strategy. And when I think of breadcrumbs, I like to think of your product as bread. And I might be giving too many metaphors today, but I think I see this somewhat biblically, or even just biologically. We all need, the nourishment from food, and the bread that is your message that you're going to give out at the end of the day, at the end of the funnel when you sell that product. Think of it as a loaf of bread. You're going to give out the whole, the full Monty, the big package of bread. And everything inside of that course that you have, that product that you're going to release, is going to be broken down into pieces, just like I've broken down this outline today. So if you are, going to teach something like, how to have a better marriage, there's probably 5 or 10 steps in that message. Um, I've got a lot of corporate consultants on the line today. I can see by your names. I remember the conversations we had. You teach companies how to turn things around, become more profitable, instill leadership again, change management. You wouldn't just walk in and start blathering about the topic to train them. You'll break it down into modules, and they'll probably be over 5 or 10 weeks to really make a difference when you do the consulting work. Well, that's what I mean by breadcrumbs. There are pieces that have to be taught, usually in some kind of an order, for people to kind of get what you're going to teach them. And I started today with the why you need to launch a product, because that was the order that I felt I had to teach this in. Some of the other pieces in a rocket launch involve the technology of putting together the launch series, the opt-in pages, all that stuff. And many of you have already been through my other course where I taught the pieces of that in pieces, in crumbs, in little croutons. Okay, so I wrote here on this slide that your product is the bread, and I want you to break it down into several parts that you think of like croutons. I see them as little square nuggets of the knowledge. And then you're going to go out and you're going to schedule a Google Hangout or a webinar series, or maybe on one or more of these topics. Or if you want to be a little bit more, I don't want to use the word professional, because you can do a very professional Google Hangout, but if you want to be more structured about it, you can launch a value video series. And that would be a series of 3 videos where you talk about pieces of this overall concept that lead to a much bigger loaf of bread. But I want to encourage you to investigate Google Hangouts, because in this launch phase, this to me is what I've run into as the most painful part for people. And what I'm noticing in this phase is that people are using the technology, the fear of the camera, the fear of things not going right as an excuse to not launch the product. So what they say to themselves, and I'm sorry if I'm talking right to you right now, is, well, I can't do that because I'm not done with my product. And if I do that when I'm not done with my product, then all these things, bad things are going to happen and everything else. And what's really happening is you're afraid to just go to google.com, get a Google Plus account, or take your Google Plus account that already exists and hit the button that says Start a Hangout. And if you need training on this, watch for another little breadcrumb I'm going to throw out there next week. It's also included in my rocket launcher training on how to use a Google Hangout. I'm telling you, it's dead simple. You've all seen me on 3 of them now, and I didn't know how to use them before my first Hangout. But I went to plus.google.com, clicked on the Hangout button, and in 10 seconds, you are live on the air to the entire world who can see your Google Plus account or your YouTube account, and then it records it for you. So if you've got a webcam, all your concern about the technology, and do I have the right camera? What about my microphone? I'll teach you all of that. It's all in my Getting Past the Tech course, and you can get that as part of my Product Rocket Launcher course. But you can skip all that for now, because I want to get you out in 30 days, right? So my first recommendation in terms of this rocket launch is, after you've identified your product and you've got a name for it and you've got an audience for it, you're going to break that product down into pieces that I call breadcrumbs or croutons, and then you're going to schedule a Google Hangout about that topic, about one of those topics. And what I did is I actually scheduled a series of 3 in a row that were sort of related to each other. And because they all related to using social media for marketing, they were all part of the underpinnings of this course we're talking about today. So I breadcrumbed my way into getting interested people to come to the rocket launch webinar today, because you're looking for a way to get your product out. So those were sensible croutons in my larger bread analogy. Now, I also recommend the Google Hangouts thing, because a lot of you look at the value video series and you think, wow, that is just so complicated. There's an opt-in page that either has a video or a really cool graphic, and then there's 3 videos I have to shoot. And so you want to shoot like all 5 videos before you even get started. And I got to tell you, it's not necessary. So if you're going to be hung up on that, even if I taught you about it, you're going to still be hung up on it. If that's you, then just do a Google Hangout. Announce 3 in a row that you're going to do every Tuesday for the next 3 weeks on these 3 pieces of your overall product name, whatever it is, or you can do what I'm doing today, which is you can hold a webinar and go through a whole bunch of that stuff in 90 minutes. And then you'll get people to really become interested in what you're talking about. Now, the way that you're going to sprinkle those breadcrumbs, which is really the other part of your launch phase, is you need to get those things out there on social media and other places where you might be traditionally networking anyway. And this is, I think, one of the biggest problems with not having a product. And I talk to a lot of lawyers about this who still give out their business card as their only quote unquote leave behind. And I say, you know, how many times do you go home with the business cards that you got at a wine and cheese or a networking party and really do anything significant with that person unless they are, you know, really interesting to you during the meeting or there's something really special about them? Chances are they don't really care too much about your business card. But if you tell them, hey, here's my website address, and if you go there, you know that topic we were just talking about? I've got a really cool video series on how to do your trademark in 2 weeks or less, or you know how to deal with mediating through a divorce. You know, I'm really sorry you're going through that right now, but I've got a great thing for you. People aren't going to be responsive to your business card the way they would to a video series or to a you know, a really nicely written set of articles about it, which are accompanied by some media. You know, people don't like to read as much as they used to. So if you don't have a product, you don't have a leave behind, and you don't have a reason for people to come back to your blog, visit your LinkedIn page, visit your Twitter page, visit your Facebook page, other than that stuff I described earlier as your inspirational thoughts, your pithy comments, your, you know, and I'm not criticizing, I mean, I do this myself. You know, it's a wonderful day to be alive. You know, we all do that. But a lot of us are doing that where we're trying to get some attention to our brand or a product, but there's nothing to latch onto. So once your product is identified and you've followed one of the strategies in the creation of breadcrumbs, which we can go into in more detail, then you can start to sprinkle breadcrumbs because all of those breadcrumbs are going to point to a collection point. Now you've got a place to point them. So you can shoot a Google Hangout, and I did one on using Instagram for business with Sue Zimmerman. That was a shameless plug for Sue Zimmerman, the Insta gal, Insta results girl, or Insta results gal. And what we did is we used Google Hangout, and we didn't have to do any setup. I just made a page where I embedded the video. And then when it was done, it was recorded automatically by YouTube, magic, witchcraft, whatever you want to call it. And then I took that when we were finished and I pulled it off of the page where I had stuck it, you know, for the live event and just stuck it on my blog. So now I have an article on my blog, which is really a video article about how to use Instagram for business. And at the end of that article, I can have a call to action that says, hey, if you want to know more about marketing your product, go check out my Getting Past the Technology series or my iMovie editing series. But you'll see that if you go to my website, I've got several products that are all at the top of my pyramid, and I'm breadcrumbing with small topics to get people interested in those. And I'm breadcrumbing by creating breadcrumbs with Google Hangout, with video launch series or video value video series, and then embedding those into my website so that I can point back to something from LinkedIn, from Facebook, from Twitter, all linking to either my YouTube channel, my blog, or some other place where I'm storing that content so they can actually see something that then leads them to a product. And hey, if you like this, here's a bigger chunk of that. I'd love to share it with you. Okay? So the moving parts of this are, I think, some of the more daunting for a lot of the people I've spoken to. And I wish it wasn't so, or I wish it weren't so, but I think that I can identify, you know, 5 moving parts that people are concerned with. One is their website or their blog. And I think most people have that worked out. But I can assure you, even if you don't have a website worked out, or if you're not happy with your website right now, you don't need to do the website and complete it before you do the breadcrumbing, because people will look at your website for some credibility. But if you do a standalone page where you have a squeeze page identifying something that you're good at, and you do some really nice copy there about your experience, your credentials, maybe a photo of you, maybe a testimonial from a prior client, that's all the credibility layer you need. What you need to do is have a place to send people where they can opt in. So, you know, if your blog isn't done, that's okay. If it is, tweak it, that's fine. But then you need a squeeze page creator so you can actually make a page where you have an opt-in form for your mailing list, a shopping cart, and then the dreaded technology part, which is the webcam, iPhone, and camera. And I'll tell you, I spent a lot of time on this with people in my Getting Past the Technology workshop, and now that I've stumbled on the Google Hangouts issue, I don't want anybody to be caught up on what camera to buy, or it's $1,500 for a camera. If you've got a laptop with a webcam and it has a microphone in it, you can start doing Google Hangouts tomorrow and stop complaining that you can't do it. Somebody asked the question, can I record a Google Hangout and post it as a YouTube video? And actually, it's better than that. This is the witchcraft I was talking about. At the very end, when you click stop broadcast, Google actually, in like seconds, because I guess they've been converting it the whole time that you're talking, it becomes a video that's on your YouTube channel immediately. So as soon as you're done, if you go to your YouTube channel, it's almost like you just uploaded a video to YouTube. It's right there, and it's so cool. And if you started out goofy, like this webinar started with me introducing myself twice, whatever else, you can also use YouTube to actually trim off the first couple of seconds or the first 20 seconds of the video. So it's really cool. And the other question I have here is somebody with a question about a leadership program for a big company, and they're not sure what their product is going to look like yet. And I'm going to try to read the rest of this question without reading it all out loud so I don't say anything bad. But the client is buying something that has modules to it, and they're going to help to develop the course as part of the first part of working together. And that, I want to just give you a round of applause for that, because that is the part of this that I think people think, oh, wait a minute, it's not all done yet. Like you can't sell something that's not done. And the wrongness of that mindset is not just that it's incorrect, but that you're depriving your client of value if you think you're going to go to them with a completely fixed set of information and not be willing to open that up and have at least one live interaction with them before you put on them the modules that are appropriate for them. So the person had a question about protecting the rights to their content and videos and such, and I'm going to actually hold off on answering that here and have a separate call with you about that, because it's something that I think is worthy of a lot more than just treatment in this webinar. That's a complicated question, and there are good answers to that. That's a very good question. So back to the moving parts. If you're struggling with any of these parts, I'm going to remove all the parts and just tell you to use a standalone squeeze page creator like from leadpages.net, and forget about anything that you don't like about your blog or your brand, and just put an opt-in page on a squeeze page creator. And there's about 3 or 4 Michelles on this call. 1 or 2 of you know what I'm talking about, that we've actually talked about this. You just take your opt-in form, you stick it on a really nice background on that page, and you tell everybody, hey, I've got this great course, go here, opt in, I want to share it with you. And the only thing you need to do on the other side of that opt-in page is direct somebody to your first video or the information about when they're going to come and watch you do the video on Google Hangouts. Piece of cake, trust me. If you don't have your shopping cart set up yet, it's okay, because if you haven't launched the actual sales page, then you've got a week before your launch to worry about the shopping cart. You can do all these things and chase yourself, and that's how I've done most of my launches in terms of pieces. I don't draft every single email that you've got. I'm sure you've each got maybe like 10 or 15 emails from me leading up to even just this product, and I don't draft all of those in advance. I typically draft them on the day that I send them, because I want to gauge the mood of the responses I'm getting. I want to gauge the number of opens and clicks in those emails. So don't think about all of this as having to be done all at once. You're going to do it in pieces, and there's a timeline to it that is a lot more complicated than this in terms of just details. But again, there's only so much that we can cover in an hour or an hour and a half webinar, but we can definitely unpack more of this if you're interested in the product launch formula or the product rocket launcher formula. So the unpacking the launch phase, I'm going to just recap a little bit of this. You're going to create bite-sized topics as part of the product name that you've created in phase 1. And the phase 1 part, by the way, would be something we could talk about for a couple hours together. or just really dial in individually to cover what your product name should be given your audience and the price point. But once you've got that, you need to pick a format that you're going to teach those bite-sized topics in. And if you've already got the camera and the video value series worked out, then that's a great way to do it. I've done some of those. But if you don't know how to do any of that and you're stuck on it, I want you to do a Google Hangout like next week. Even if you do one that doesn't lead anywhere, I want you to go just do that and create one. Once you've created a bite-sized piece, then you need to just create an opt-in page that people can go to get access to it, and then the landing page that they go to if they opt in. Very simple stuff. You've seen me do all this. You may not know how to do it, but that's all in the getting past the tech stuff. So I think a lot of you have covered that. And then you email your list. You email them and tell them, I've got this great course. Go to this page, give me your email address, and I'll send you right to the page where you can find it. And once you've got that list mailed, you can also notify people on your social networks, on Facebook, LinkedIn, all the places that you network socially on the web. Go and breadcrumb there. And then one of the things I learned from Sue Zimmerman as well that I hadn't really thought of in terms of my Instagram account is that anywhere you've got a social media account, don't just link in your profile, like where, the little part where you describe yourself, don't just link back to your main website. Link to whatever you're doing right that moment. So like for the last week, I've been actually linking to the webinar announcement for this because that's really what I was about this week. And I wanted people to find that and not just stumble over to Barefoot and Rich and find 10 other things. So make your social networking about what you're launching, and then make noise anywhere you can. I mean, even if you're out, in public, tell them about it. Get their email address, send them to it. Once you've done that, you're going to assess the number of responses that you got. If you sent that out to everybody on your list, on all your social networks, you posted it everywhere, and nobody opted in to go see your content, then you either have to expand your reach if you only have like 6 people, or if you've reached hundreds of people by email and nobody opted in, you may have to rethink what your message is or what the name of your program is. Because if nobody cares, then you got to do something else, right? And this is where the rubber meets the road. If you went through all the trouble to actually build a 12-hour course and then started the process that I'm showing you on this page and found out that nobody wanted to even opt in to hear the first part of your free training, think about how devastated you would be about all the time you'd spent. Because to create 10 or 12 hours of training, or even just a five session training, takes a lot of time, a lot of preparation, a lot of sweat and spirit. And I don't want to see you waste that time anymore. I want you to put the topic out there and the concept out there and see who opts in. Now, I got very good responses to my first launch of the Getting Over the Technology series, which was geared towards people that already knew they had a product idea. They weren't really doing anything with it yet, but they wanted to figure out all the moving parts of their web pages and shooting videos and stuff like that. And I'll tell you what, when I put that out there as an idea for a free video series, it was like the bison or the wildebeest, crossing the plains. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. And everybody loved it. And what I did is I then collected all those email addresses and said, okay, here's more stuff. And I gave them more stuff. And all those people became my affiliates. They became my customers. They became people that gave me testimonials. And it all started with me putting a product out there that they could actually sink their teeth into. And the great thing is that when you put a product out there in the form of free stuff that leads to a product, nobody holds it against you because they want it. They're looking for that information. And if you've got more of it to offer, and if they see the value in it, they're going to actually give you money for more of it. So get an idea out there first and don't waste your time finishing and packaging the product. Now, in some cases, if you have enough traction and you're doing like a value video series and you get enough opt-ins, then absolutely forge ahead. Shoot your second video and then shoot your third video and eventually your sales video. But you don't have to shoot all 4 of them before you even start. Get people, get enough done for your opt-in page and your first video, and then sit back and see what happens. And if you're lucky enough, like I was, to have a lot of people opt in, I said, okay, I need to get that second video done. I knew the topic, I had the outline already, just hadn't shot it. Shot the second video, announced it 3 days later, more great feedback, more great comments on Facebook. So don't build it all before they come. Get them to start coming first, and then you can build the rest of it. I made a visual here. I'm not sure if this is as helpful as I hoped, but I made 3 rows of this launch phase. The 3-part launch phase. The first part was, declaring your product name and then breaking it down into little bites so that you've got something to breadcrumb with. And then you're going to create those breadcrumbs in the form of opt-in page, opt-in video, where you're going to actually sprinkle those little bits out there. And in that phase, you're going to create your first video, unless you're going to be doing a webinar, in which case you don't even need to create a video in advance. And then once you've been through that second part, which I just covered in the outline on the previous slide, you're going to assess, count, evaluate, look at the response you got, and if there's enough interest, you're going to move forward with your second, third, and fourth videos, and then eventually your sales page and video. And I want to let you off the hook here, or let yourself off the hook. If you send your list to an opt-in page and you tell all your social networking buddies to go to an opt-in page and nobody opts in, you don't have to continue. It's like reading a bad book. If you pick up a bad book, you can stop reading it. You don't have to finish the book. Well, you don't have to finish your series if nobody cares about it, but you can pivot really quickly to another one. And so the result, if it actually is favorable, is you'll have X number of new leads on your mailing list. Bravo for you, whether it's 2 or 200. You'll have X number of customers. And again, if it's only 1 or 2 customers, bravo on that too, because if your price point is high enough and what you're worth, it'll make it worth your time. And those customers will become your affiliates. So the third phase of delivery, I'm not going to try to cover in this webinar because you already know probably what form your product is going to take. I'm going to very highly recommend that you follow the online training course delivery method, unless you're going to deliver it in person or a combination of those two. If you are going to try to put together a packaged set of DVDs or a 3-volume set of books, more power to you. I wish you the best of luck. I actually think philosophically that a book is the hardest thing to do because it establishes a lot of credibility for you, and you probably should have a book at some point if you don't. But it's also something that is not going to make you a tremendous amount of money, and so you should only use it as a leverage point to sell your high-value product. So if you are interested in learning more about how the entire product rocket launcher sequence works, including how to do all the technology pieces, how to edit your movies, how to figure out what your product name should be, check out the page at teachingmillions.com/rocket. It's on your screen right now. You'll notice when you get there that if you're just leaving the webinar and you're going to check out that page, you won't find a sales video on that page, which is not my style because I usually would be more personal and give you that. But I've done that explanation of the product to some extent in this webinar. And I've priced the product at a point where I think it's probably about a 10th to a 20th of the value of time that I'm putting into this training. So it has tremendous value, but I'll let you read about it on that page. I'm so happy that you all came today. I'm blown away just by the number of people that came to the webinar today, and happy to take your questions by email. But so happy to share this with you. I hope this was helpful, and I encourage you to get out there and put your product out there in less than 30 days. The getting past the tech stuff. Somebody asked, is that still for free? Well, the 3 value videos that I did are still on my website in the Getting Past the Tech section, and I think you can opt in to that right on my sidebar. But I've actually lowered the price of my full course for that, and you can find that on my website as well, or you can send me an email about that. And that's actually 6 hours of training. But all of that is included. I've included everything I've done so far into this product rocket launch training course. So you'll get the entire 6-hour series of how to use all the technological pieces to put your product together and get it out there. You'll get the iMovie 2-hour deep dive training, which shows you how to actually edit all your movies. And then in addition to that, you'll have this new series, which is going to be actually, I think, 7 or 8 hours of training altogether, including a first session, which is going to be a live interactive session where we identify for each person that's in the course. And if I have too many for one call, I'll do more than one call for that. We're going to specifically identify your product name and what it is that you should be selling and at what price point so that you can actually get that launch out and that launch sequence that we talked about within the next week after that. So within 2 weeks of enrolling in this product, you'll already be launching the first part of your sequence. So I look forward to doing that with as many of you as are interested. And I've really had a great time talking to all you and training many of you on these topics. So I look forward to the feedback. And again, please email info@barefootandrich.com if you have any other questions. And the address again is on your screen. It's teachingmillions.com/rocket. And I'll talk to you soon. Take care.